imagine this for a second. Your entire career, everything you've worked for, your service to your country, it's suddenly on the line. Not because of how well you do your job or your dedication, but because of a medical condition affecting your skin, how you shave, basically. For many U.S. Army soldiers, this isn't some hypothetical. It's becoming a reality. So today we're doing a deep dive into a new Army policy. It's causing a lot of concern, asking some really critical questions about inclusion, about military readiness, and what professionalism even means in the armed forces today. Welcome to the deep dive. We try to cut through the noise and get to the heart of the issues. Our mission today: to unpack the U.S. Army's updated grooming policy. Specifically, we're looking at how it impacts soldiers with pseudofolliculitis Barbie PFB. We're going beyond just the headlines here. We'll touch on the medical side, the personal impact, and the bigger picture societal strategic consequences. Our source material includes reports, analyses, and notably excerpts from Army Grooming Policy, a cut against diversity, which offers a pretty critical take.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating, isn't it? How something that seems so simple, like an appearance rule, can just, spiral into these really complex areas. We're talking diversity, actual military readiness, and even just the basic well-being of the soldiers themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really makes you think about how an institution like the Army handles the diversity of its own people.
Exactly. Is it adapting or is it sticking to old ways? It raises that fundamental question, what's the priority here?
Okay, so let's lay the foundation. What exactly is changing for soldiers? And let's talk about PFB. What is this medical condition that's right at the center of all this?
Well, the core of it is this new directive. The Army plans to stop allowing long-term shaving waivers for soldiers who suffer from pseudofolliculitis Barbie, PFB. And to really get why this is a big deal, we need to understand PFB. It's not just like razor burn. It's a chronic skin condition, medically recognized. It happens when tightly curled hairs, usually after shaving, curl back and grow into the skin instead of out, and that causes, well, a lot of problems. Right, it triggers inflammation. You get these painful bumps, papules, and pustules, technically. It can lead to bacterial infections pretty easily, dark spots called hyperpigmentation, and in some cases, permanent scarring, keloids even. So for someone with moderate to severe PFB, daily shaving isn't just uncomfortable, it can be genuinely painful and disfiguring.
Painful, disfiguring.
Yeah,
It sounds like it could even affect their ability to do their job properly sometimes.
absolutely. Wearing equipment, chin straps, gas masks, it can all aggravate the condition. Now, a really critical point here is who gets PFB most often.
Okay.
The source material is very clear, and the medical literature backs this up. PFB disproportionately affects Black men. The American Osteopathic College of Dermatology, for instance, reports that up to 60%, 0% of Black men experience it.
60%.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's not a small group.
Not at all. And for years, decades actually, the military knew this. They acknowledged it as a legitimate health issue, and they accommodated it with medical waivers. Shaving profiles, they're often called.
Right. I've heard that term.
These waivers allowed soldiers to maintain, a short, neatly trimmed beard or stubble. It avoided triggering the PFB flare-ups. It was practical, it was health conscious, and frankly, it was inclusive. It let people serve without unnecessary medical hardship.
Okay, so that was the old way. Practical accommodation. Now, what are the implications of this new policy? What happens to a soldier who needs that waiver long-term now?
Well, the implications are pretty stark. If a soldier needs a shaving exemption for more than 12 months total within any 2-year period, they essentially face a choice. They're basically compelled to undergo laser hair removal treatments.
Laser hair removal.
Yes. And the source mentions this is costly. We're talking potentially up to thousands of dollars per case.
Thousands. Wow. Is that covered?
That's the tricky part. The source says the Department of Defense may cover some costs, but it's not a guarantee for everything. Think multiple sessions, potential travel, time off. It's not clear if all of that is covered or just the procedure itself. So there's likely still a financial burden or at least significant uncertainty and stress for the soldier.
So, financial stress, logistical hassle. But you mentioned laser treatments. Are they safe? Are there risks involved?
That's absolutely critical. The financial part is one thing, but laser hair removal is not risk-free, especially for individuals with darker skin tones who are, remember, the most likely to need this because of PFB.
Okay, what kind of risks are we talking about?
The source specifically points out risks like permanent scarring and also changes in skin pigmentation, either hyperpigmentation, darkening of the skin, or hypopigmentation, lightening of the skin. These changes can be irreversible.
Permanent scarring. permanent skin color changes, just to meet a grooming standard.
Exactly. Imagine being told to keep your job, to continue serving, you need to have this medical procedure that could permanently alter your appearance, leave scars, change your skin color. It's not an elective cosmetic thing anymore. It becomes a condition of employment.
That puts soldiers in an absolutely agonizing position, doesn't it?
Mm.
Endure the pain and potential disfigurement of PFB from shaving, or undergo a potentially risky permanent medical procedure.
It's a terrible choice.
So think about that, soldier. What kind of message does this policy send? When you shift from accommodating a medical issue to mandating a risky procedure, what does that say about the Army's values? And let us know what you think in the comments. Do you believe it's right for any employer, let alone the military, to require a medical procedure with known risks, especially when it hits one demographic so much harder?
It really flips the script on responsibility, doesn't it? Instead of the institution adapting, it's demanding the individual adapt their body, potentially permanently. It raises some serious ethical questions about institutional authority over personal medical decisions, particularly as a condition of service.
Definitely. Now let's talk about the justification. Historically, the big reason given for mandatory shaving, across all branches really, has been the gas mask seal. You need a tight seal for protection in CBRN environments, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear.
Right, the CBRN argument, it's always been the bedrock justification, non-negotiable readiness issue, supposedly.
But does that argument still hold water today? I mean, especially with modern research. Is it really that black and white?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The source brings up some compelling counter-evidence. Specifically, a 2021 peer-reviewed study published in Military Medicine.
Okay, what did that find?
It concluded that neatly trimmed beards, we're not talking long, bushy beards, but neatly trimmed ones do not significantly interfere with the seal on modern gas masks.
Really? So the science, it kind of undermines that core justification.
It directly undermines it. This wasn't just a quick look. It was a systematic study looking at seal integrity with different masks, different facial hair. The conclusion suggests that a bit of well-maintained facial hair isn't the safety risk it's often made out to be. It makes you wonder if the operational necessity argument is maybe based on older equipment or assumptions.
That's a major finding, if the science says it's okay.
And it's not just the science pointing out inconsistencies. Think about existing policies. The source mentions troops in Alaska. They're often allowed to skip shaving in the winter because of the risk of frostbite. That's a direct health and operational reason, and an exception is made.
So we make exceptions for cold weather.
Exactly. It shows that grooming uniformity isn't this absolute unbreakable rule. The military can be flexible when there's a clear need. So if you can make an exception for frostbite, why not for a chronic, painful medical condition like PFB that affects a large group of soldiers? It raises questions about how consistently operational necessity is actually applied.
That inconsistency is striking, and it leads us to something really powerful, the voices from within the ranks. The source quotes an anonymous senior NCO, a non-commissioned officer. They spoke out, but feared retaliation. They said, quote, "Of course this is racially motivated. There's no tactical reason. You can look professional with facial hair."
Wow, that's a strong statement. And the fact they feared retaliation for saying it.
Exactly. It speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Someone on the inside, dealing with the day-to-day, believes it's racially motivated, lacks tactical grounding, and that professionalism isn't just about being clean-shaven, but they're afraid to say it openly.
That suggests a climate where raising concerns, especially about potential discrimination, is risky. That's a problem in itself.
It really is. What do you, our listeners, think about that NCO statement? Is there a tactical reason anymore? And can someone look professional with well-groomed facial hair in the military? Does appearance automatically equal professionalism? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective.
You know, that internal dissent, even whispered, is a huge red flag. It signals a real disconnect between the official policy justifications and how it's perceived on the ground by those affected. It becomes more than just a grooming rule. It starts to erode trust and morale.
And this policy, it doesn't happen in isolation, does it? The source connects it to a bigger picture, a broader shift happening under Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. What's the context there regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI, and how might that be playing into these grooming decisions?
Right. The source paints a picture of a significant ideological realignment. Secretary Hegseth has been very public, very critical of DEI programs in the military.
Okay, what's his argument against them?
He seems to frame them as undermining traditional military values or effectiveness. The source also mentions he's reportedly rolled back specific recruitment efforts aimed at underrepresented communities. So it's not just talk, it appears to be translating into policy shifts.
And how does grooming fit into that?
Well, the source details how Hegseth has lamented things like man buns and dreadlocks, framing them as signs of cultural decline in the military. This framing is key. It suggests this grooming crackdown, including the PFB policy change, might be, as the source puts it, less about discipline and more about a political aesthetic.
A political aesthetic,
Yeah,
meaning enforcing a certain look.
potentially. If the traditional justifications, like the gas mask seal, are weakened by science and existing exceptions, then this focus on a specific, maybe more traditional or homogeneous appearance becomes a more plausible driver for the policy. It suggests a desire to enforce a particular image, maybe regardless of the impact on diversity or medical necessity.
So if this is part of a bigger ideological push for a certain look, what are the actual real-world consequences, especially for Army recruitment, which we know has been facing huge challenges lately?
This is where the rubber really meets the road, and the source provides some stark numbers. Army data shows that the number of white recruits dropped dramatically by 43% between 2018 and 2023.
43%. That's a massive decline.
Huge. It creates a significant gap that the Army needs to fill just to maintain its numbers and readiness. They're already struggling to meet recruiting goals.
Okay, so white recruitment is down significantly. What about other groups?
This is the crucial part. During that same period, minority recruitment has remained consistent, even strong. Specifically, Black Americans make up about 14% of the U.S. population, but account for roughly 25% of new Army enlistees.
25%. So Black recruits are significantly overrepresented compared to their share of the population.
Exactly. They, along with other minority communities, have been absolutely vital in keeping Army recruitment numbers up during this really difficult post-Iraq, post-Afghanistan slump. They've been a consistently loyal and dedicated source of soldiers when recruitment has been toughest.
So, hold on, let me get this straight. The Army is facing a recruitment crisis, largely due to a drop in white recruits. At the same time, minority recruits, especially Black Americans, are stepping up and filling that gap, enlisting at high rates.
That's what the data shows.
And now the Army implements a policy that disproportionately impacts Black soldiers, potentially forcing them into risky medical procedures or even pushing them out.
That's the paradox the source highlights. It seems strategically counterintuitive, doesn't it? Why risk alienating or creating barriers for one of the demographics that is most reliably helping you meet your personnel goals, especially right now?
It really does seem counterintuitive. Considering those recruitment numbers, what's your take and what do you listening think about the strategic wisdom here? Does this policy make sense when you desperately need recruits and a key group keeping you afloat is the one most negatively affected? Let us know your thoughts on that strategic angle.
The source puts it bluntly. A policy like this is, at best, short-sighted and at worst, discriminatory. From a purely strategic standpoint, given the recruitment realities, it seems like a significant risk. It shifts the burden entirely onto the individual soldier, disproportionately affecting one group, rather than the institution finding inclusive, science-based solutions. It's hard to see how that strengthens the force long-term.
History often has lessons for us, doesn't it? The source actually brings up a really interesting parallel from the past, something that seems to run completely counter to the Army's current direction. What can we learn from that?
Yeah, there's a fascinating historical example from the Navy in the early 1970s. Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, who was the chief of naval operations back then.
Zumwalt, right, the Z-grams.
Exactly. He issued these famous directives, the Z-grams, aimed at modernizing the Navy and improving morale. And one of them, Z-gram 57, specifically allowed sailors to grow beards.
And why did he do that?
A major reason, explicitly cited, was to accommodate Black sailors who were suffering from PFB, the same issue we're discussing today. Zumwalt recognized that the rigid shaving standards were causing real medical problems, hurting morale, and frankly, were unnecessary barriers for a significant part of his force.
So he saw the problem and adapted the policy 50 years ago.
Precisely. He saw that inclusion, fairness, and morale sometimes required bending outdated traditions. It wasn't just about looking different. It was about recognizing a medical reality and prioritizing the well-being and effectiveness of his sailors. It was pragmatic leadership. He understood that forcing everyone into one mold wasn't actually making the Navy stronger.
That's incredible. He addressed this exact issue driven by PFB affecting black sailors back in the 70s by allowing beards.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
He prioritized people and readiness over a uniform look that was causing harm.
So fast forward 50 years, and the Army is moving in the opposite direction. Reinstating stricter rules, seemingly ignoring the medical science we talked about, ignoring the known disproportionate impact.
That's the stark contrast the source draws. It feels like a regression, moving away from a proven inclusive approach that was implemented decades ago. It raises the question of why that lesson seems to have been forgotten or is being actively rejected now.
So at the end of the day, what message does this policy send? To the soldiers currently serving, especially those affected, and to potential recruits looking at the Army. What are the values being communicated here?
That's the core question, isn't it? The source argues pretty strongly that if the Army pushes ahead with this strict no-waiver policy for PFB, it sends a clear message that tradition is valued more than talent, that uniformity trumps fairness, that appearance counts more than inclusion.
That's a heavy message.
It is,
Yeah.
because, as the source points out, the military needs people. It needs them to be ready, capable, and committed. That's fundamental. But it also needs those people to feel seen and valued by the institution, valued for their service, their skills, not just judged by their skin or hair.
And this policy might make some feel unseen
Mm.
or unfairly judged.
It could, yes. When you force someone into a risky medical procedure for a condition linked to their race, especially when the tactical need is questionable, it risks sending the message that they aren't valued for who they are, or that their specific challenges don't matter as much as maintaining a particular look. And the ultimate cost. The source concludes, with this policy, the Army risks sending a different message entirely, that some soldiers are more fit than others, not based on ability, but based on appearances shaped by race. That's a deeply troubling implication.
Fit based on appearance, not ability.
It suggests a narrowing of what it means to be a soldier, potentially excluding capable individuals based on factors unrelated to performance. And as the source says, that's a costly price to pay for the Army and for the country it serves. The cost isn't just in dollars or recruitment numbers, but in morale, diversity, trust, and the very strength that comes from an inclusive force.
Wow. Okay, so today we've really dug deep into this new Army grooming policy. We've looked at the medical condition, PFB, the policy changes, the questionable justifications like the gas mask seal, the impact on recruitment, especially among minority soldiers, the historical context with Admiral Zumwalt, and the potential message this sends about Army values. It's clear this is way more than just being about beards.
Absolutely. It really highlights how these specific rules, these seemingly small policy choices, can have massive ripple effects impacting strategy, readiness, and the lives of the individual soldiers who dedicate themselves to service.
So as we wrap up, here's something to think about. In today's world, military strength often depends on attracting diverse talent and being adaptable. Can strict appearance-based policies that disproportionately affect certain groups actually serve the nation's long-term strategic interests? What do you think is the ultimate cost when tradition, or maybe a certain aesthetic, is prioritized over the talent, the health, and the morale of a diverse fighting force? We really want to hear what you think. What stood out to you from this discussion? Share your insights, your questions, maybe even your own experiences down in the comments. Your engagement is what keeps these deep dives going and helps build this community. And if you found this discussion valuable, please hit that like button, subscribe to the deep dive for more analyses like this, and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. It really helps us reach more people who want to understand the complexities behind the headlines. Thanks for joining us.